Okay, so I don't have any slides, so we have to make sure that you can actually see what I have here.
Can you make it light?
Yeah. Oh wait, light mode. Okay, wait. How do you change this? No, wait. This is
just make left and bottom panels a bit smaller.
So where? You want to do it? So what do you have to do? You want to do it? Just do it. If you know what it is, just do it. It goes maybe quicker.
I think it makes sense to move this panel. It's the minimum. And this one.
Oh, no, that's okay. I think the question was if we can switch from dark mode to light mode, no? That was your...
Okay.
Theme, okay. Color theme, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, and now we can go to... Which one do you like? This one?
The red one.
This one good?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, looks nicer. Size is okay or larger? Back? Okay, Nico? Okay, good. Perfect. Okay, so I'm Ronny, and I wanted to talk about how we use agents to protect ourselves from humans. So I don't have a single slide, so therefore it's important that you can actually see this. We'll first go just to show you the mechanics of what we're doing. In the end, we'll tie it back how we actually use this for real in production. So let's start with the scenario here. So imagine we are a platform over which users can sell books, think like something like Amazon. And then for each seller, we want to have like a homepage where they can feature a couple of books. And what we want to do is that we have some teasers so people get interested in it. Now, for the seller for whom we do want to do this, so they selected here a couple of books. So we have there The Hobbit, Critic of Pure Reasoning in German, and then The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And so what we want to now do is create these teasers. So therefore, we have a very simple function for this where we give the books, and then basically we just call OpenAI. We say we want to create these teasers. They must be in English. There should be no profanity in them, and they should be phrased like a question, right? So we just send this to OpenAI. We get them back, and that's it. And then, of course, we are diligent programmers, so we also want to know that the stuff actually works. So we have them also here, just an evaluator for this. Again, super simple. We just go to OpenAI, we tell it, we expect it that it's in English, no profanity, and then what we ask it to give it back for each of the teasers, well, just tell us if it's good or if it's not good, and why, and then in the end, just give us a summary, what overall you think about all the teasers we provided. So all very straightforward. So if we run this, okay, so one sec, okay, wait a minute. Wait, internet. It's the one thing I didn't check beforehand. Okay, let's try again. That looks better. So here we can already see on the bottom how it's creating the teasers here for us, right? So the first one, do you want to join a Hobbit on an epic adventure? Well, that sounds like the Hobbit. And then below we have the evaluations of it where we say, 3 out of 3 is good. And we have a summary where it says, it's all great because it's in English and there's no profanity in it. Okay, so far so good. Now what's happening if you produce something like this? Of course, your sellers are going to tell you, I love the teasers, but it's not aligned with our branding, so I somehow need to actually tell it what to do. And so for this, maybe you saw this before already, we have here the option also to have user instructions where the user could define something like this. So let's do this. I'll just copy here one of them. So we have now here the rhyme shop. So it says, all the teasers, they must rhyme. So we put it here, and let's run this thing again. Okay. Well, it's rhyme-ish, but it comes out of. And you still see that actually the evaluations of this is also fine, so they're all good, while the user just said how they want to have it formatted, there's no conflict, all good. But of course you know what's going to happen next, and the user figure out this whole English thing, I don't really like it. So let's enforce that we actually want something else. So then let's just go with the example here. So here we say, the teaser must be in the native language of the author. So let's do this. And that's obviously going to be a problem with the critic of Pure Reasoning, since Kant is German. So we suddenly get the teasers in German. And it The good thing is at least our evaluation figures it out, so it says one of them is wrong, and it also properly explains to us why it's wrong, because it's in Germany, we don't want this. And so we'll show you afterwards how we really use that, but so this is happening all the time for us, that people, they stumble over something that we actually think is important, and they just try as hard as they can to break this, and then you get exactly these kind of situations. And so here is what we do with this. Just to get it out, let me just copy this over. Quickly talk about it. Okay, so now what we feed into here is that we just run in loops here to fix that. And so our report that we had before, we actually see how many of them are wrong. And so we said, well, just as long as there are issues, we're just trying to improve the user instructions so that they are aligned with what we actually want to achieve. And the way we do this is we run for the optimized instruction. We'll look to this in a second, for which we actually only give the instruction itself and the report of, where it tells us what's good and what's bad about it. And then we simply run again the generation of the teasers. We check again. Well, if it's good, and otherwise we make another round. And for the optimization, if we quickly look here into it, same thing, just we go to OpenAI, we tell it, fix it, we tell you what the instructions are at the moment, and we give you the feedback, what the LM said, what's good or bad about. So if we run this one, okay, so we see still the issue, the second one is in German, so that's not good. And now it's trying to optimize the instructions. So there you see, now it says it must be in English, and then it's fixed. Now let's run it again. Sometimes it's a bit more interesting what's happening. It's the problem of demoing something non-deterministic. Okay, it's fixing. Okay, well, not happening now. But sometimes you would go then that it goes over multiple steps. So for example, it might then push too much into the direction of the language, and then suddenly profanity comes in from the third book, and then you see how it just goes over rounds until at one point it's come to a point where it's actually aligned with what we want to achieve. Okay, so far on the mechanics. So let me just quickly show you, wait, maybe loaded it. Oh, here we go. How we use that. So that's our application. So we process like user feedback and find insights in it and so on and so forth. And one of the big things that we're doing is that we're organizing all this data. So we put it into themes, we tag the data and so on and so forth. And we tend to do this on quite large amount of data, so in millions. So you see that we need to prepare the data quite well that we can actually do this on scale. And for this, we have a lot of best practices, but then, of course, sometimes you need to have the user to inject also context to that, right? So if you have, for example, a survey and people just say, yeah, it's all amazing, it's very hard to work with this, the user needs to inject this data. And for this, we have what we call here is like instructions and also jobs. So for example, here is now for tagging, where we want to see what kind of feedback this is. And now you see here we have different tags that we assign, and we have description of them. And for this, we're using exactly these kind of agents, because what often is happening is users, they set it up, but then they might have taxonomies that are overlapping, right? So that's one issue. Or the description are just contradicting each other, and so on and so forth. And for this, we're using this kind of techniques on the one side to automate them in the background, if we can do. But what we also learned that often users don't overly appreciate it, but then we can play it back to the user and tell them, hey, that's the kind of changes you want to do to improve that. And so if we tie this back to the thing I just showed you before, so what you would, for example, see here is that on the evaluations, it's not as simple as I showed you before, but what we actually look to is the error rates, how many of the insights we have afterwards the correct text. So that's what we're optimizing against. And then here as the kind of instructions, well, it's the text here, but it's also the taxonomies that we then optimize. Good, that's what I wanted to share. Happy for some questions.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. How do you know what is right? Like, because you can change the instruction of the user, but you can also change the instruction of the thing generating. Like, how do you weigh which one to change?
Okay, so I think the issue that we mainly face is that, so we have to have quite clean data so that afterwards we can do these operations, right? So what we're doing is kind of a mixture of LMs, vector search, structured search, free text search, and so on and so forth. So you have to have clean data. So for example, if you look into similarity via vector search, right? You want to drop all the dimensions that don't matter. So for example, for us, if we get, let's say, survey results or interviews or whatever that are in different languages, the languages are typically not important. So you want to drop this one out. And you want to standardize the length and so on and so forth. But what would happen is that the users then say, no, I want to have the language in, right? And they just don't understand why that becomes a problem. That then down the road, the error rates, how we assign these tags, get worse and worse and worse. So in that respect, we actually know what's the right thing to do. But there's still situations where the user might actually be right. And that's what we learn why we, some things you can automate and optimize and it's always right. But often the better strategy is actually to explain to the user, here's a trade-off, this is why we're doing this. If you really think and you're okay with higher error rates, well, do it your way. So I think that's more or less what we learned is best to play it back to the user.
I was curious about prompt injecting with the instructions that still match your evaluation rules but expose information. How, you can expose information from your tool through prompt injecting, but I will still make it pass through the evaluation if I know what your evaluation was. Is that a risk or concern for you with the instructions coming from the user?
Sorry, I think it's just very difficult to say.
It's a bit hard. Like prompt injecting with, if you get instructions from the user, I can also provide specific instructions to access certain tools with your agent that can be fed into outside with what you're giving me as well. Is there a risk of that?
Okay, so if I understood correctly, you talk about if the user provides instructions that would kind of expose data that they shouldn't have access.
Yeah, correct, almost.
Okay, it's a very good question. Now, this is not really a big issue for us since we sell it to companies and, well, that's their data and they can just operate with their data. But it's one of the things that you could, for example, use this for, right? I mean, you saw this when we enforced here no profanity. So that might be your rule as a company. You don't want this and you don't care what the sellers on your platform are doing and you could nonetheless enforce it. Now, I think for these very simple use cases that I showed initially, of course, you can do this much easier, right? I mean, you know the rules beforehand, you see the instructions, you could just run against it. I think where this is the most interesting, this approach for us is more, when the evaluation isn't that straightforward. Like, for example, when we have the tagging, what we're optimizing for is the error rates. You cannot just, push this somewhere and say, these instructions, are they good or bad? Often you can't answer this like this. And I think this is where we found this the most powerful to work for us.
Do you understand me now, or do I need to?
Yeah, I think it works better. Okay. It was just
Great.
echo, yeah.
What kind of complexity do you come across with the types of rules customers have? For example, a rhyming one, I know, for example, language models are really bad at doing ABBA scheme rhyming. I imagine your customers are not requiring such a rhyming scheme, but do you find other types of rules that are too complex?
I would say, I'm not sure if there's a generic answer to this. I think we see that it's actually pretty good in the things we're doing. What we most, I think where we have the biggest issue is that just the information isn't there, right? So for example, if you look into survey data, that's probably the most extreme one. Let's just go a step back. Traditionally what you're doing is people just ignore what you write in the free text, even though it's actually the most interesting bits in the whole survey. But a lot of these, around 70-80% of all the answers is just 2 words, right? And you need to provide actually quite a lot of additional context that you can make sense out of this. If somebody says it's all amazing, well, you can only know this if you know what's the company about, what's the product about, what's the concrete question you ask about, what were the questions you asked before about. And kind of infusing this additional context into it, I would say that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you for a great talk. Always useful.